Please let's all give a warm Georgia Tech welcome to Joanne Bauer.
Good afternoon. So how's everybody doing? Did everybody have a Red Bull or the Starbucks or whatever you needed? Did you bring an extra? I am absolutely thrilled to be here, and I have to tell you this group is energizing to me before I've even talked to you. And I want to tell you that I don't know that I could have repeated my resume, so you did a terrific job. Thank you very much. I want to have a little fun today. Would that be okay? And I took the topic of leadership, okay? But I called it my journey. And I have somebody here from Kimberly-Clark, Joy Jordan, so she'll be able to stand up and say, no, she's really not telling you the truth, guys. Here's what happened, okay? But I called it a journey for a reason. I would tell you that as short as 5 years, well, first of all, is today Wednesday? Okay. I just got back from Japan. I'm leaving for Europe. I'm not quite sure of where I am. So it is today that I've been with Kimberly-Clark 30 years. Okay? So you're going to hear in a few minutes, one of the things I wanted to tell you is I am an incredibly proud mother. And I have a son who is a senior at the Stern School of Business in New York, NYU. And he's a senior graduating. And I have a daughter who is a sophomore at SMU. They are my millennial coaches. And when I talked about being here 30 years, my son said to me, what I know was going through your mind, oh my God, I could never do that. How did you ever last at one company that long? So I'd like a show of hands who was really thinking that. Honestly? Okay, I think there's probably more. So we're going to talk a little bit about my career and why I ended up here 30 years, and a little bit about why, as short as 5 years ago, I'm not sure I would say that I was qualified to talk about leadership. And that's why I chose that as my topic today, because I believe that we have many, many managers, but it is really, really hard to lead. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to be more than willing to tell you all the mistakes that I have made along the way and probably will make going forward. So first of all, for those of you that have never been there, Appleton, Wisconsin, I'm going to start with a little bit of history so you know about Kimberly-Clark. Some might call this a mini recruiting session. Okay, you can take it any way you want. I personally believe you can't be a great leader if you're not working for a great company. And our company started in 1872, so you can see some pictures about that. What I really want to point out is if you think about Kotex, some people, and I had it said to me today, gee, I didn't really know Kimberly-Clark was in healthcare. Well, we've actually had a healthcare division since, I think, about the 70s. But we actually started with bandage material that later became Kotex, feminine care products, back in World War I, I believe it was. Am I right, Joy? Great. So here's some pictures of how we've evolved, where we were at the beginning, and some of the products that you will notice going forward. Now, today, who's Kimberly-Clark? We have 4 global businesses. We have a personal care business, a tissue business, a healthcare business, and a KC professional business. And I believe that in most of the bathrooms at Georgia Tech, we have Kimberly-Clark products, right? Great choice by you guys. Did you vote on that? Yeah. Okay, a little active here, okay? You all had your Red Bull, I didn't, okay? 56,000 employees worldwide. I'm going to talk a lot today about being a global company and what that means and how you should think about that. 1.3 billion. So what are there roughly? How many people on the planet? 6 billion? Okay, come on, you're all Georgia Tech grads, right? 6 billion? Okay, so 1.3 of those every day use a Kimberly-Clark product. And we take very, very seriously, I want to talk a little bit about the foundations of a company. We hold the #1 or #2 share in most of the products that we have. I probably don't need to put this up there because I'm pretty much assume that you would have all of these in your house as opposed to anything that might say like Sherman, okay, right? Yeah, okay. We actually, if you take Huggies, Scott, and Kleenex, have 3 of the audited by Nielsen $1 billion brands in the top 40 in the world. And we take that very, very seriously. Branding for us is something that we protect, just like our IP. All right, so we're really, really careful. We were founded in 1872, and we still live by the principles that we had back in 1872. And that's a pretty important thing to say today as you think about where companies have gone and some of the big names that are no longer there. The other thing I want to take a moment to just talk about is, in those founding principles, we have always talked about being fair with our customer and fair with our employees. But we also have a huge focus on our corporate responsibility and our social responsibility. So both from an economic, an environmental, and a social standpoint. And in fact, I sit on the board with Dr. Terry Bloom on the MedShare board, which is all about how do we give back product that hasn't been used in the medical industry to other places around the world. So, and we are doing things everywhere. We've got a corporate sustainability report. I would encourage all of you to look on the web about what we believe in and how we live that, starting in each one of our local areas. So pretty great company overall, a great starting point. Now, I asked them to put up a picture of my kids. Okay, I really don't like to be the center of attention, so we're not going to stay on this slide really long. Okay, a couple key things. I actually didn't have the slide in here. And then I thought to myself, you know what? I have a sneaky suspicion you might want to know how I got to where I am. All right, so the first slide I had in there just said luck. All right, we're going to bring the Red Bull in, okay? I actually graduated with an undergrad, and I just had this discussion with your president, with an undergrad in English from Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. I was born in Wisconsin, moved to Connecticut. So that is that picture, and I got an MBA from the University of Wisconsin, actually in Oshkosh. I happen to be a big football fan, okay? Anybody want to guess who that is? Okay, my number 1 team is the Patriots. Now, that might happen to be number 12. My number 2 team would be the Packers, okay, who had a really good year. So I think whoever didn't find my children's picture was able to find the Tom Brady picture. Okay, I've told you about my 2 kids, and I want to talk a little bit about my career. And this is what I want to tell you, because how many of you are seniors? Okay. So I need an honest show of hands, because I've been having this discussion with my son who's about to graduate. And then one day he says to me, Mom, I'm really excited to get out there. He's going to be working for Deloitte. He actually has a job, so he's feeling pretty good about it. So who's feeling like time to get out of college and I'm ready to go work? Okay, well, 2 hands. Okay, then on the next day I call him up. It's like, oh my God, Mom, this is like the end of my life. I'm going to be working for the rest of my life. How long have you been working at Kimberly-Clark? I don't think I'm ready to graduate. Anybody in that camp? Honestly, your parents aren't here. I'm not going to tell them. Right, okay. But it's been really, really fun for me to look at all of that, because my career, as I put it, is the best, unplanned, didn't go my way career somebody could have. I started out in the golden heyday of marketing. I was a product manager on DEPEND Incontinence Products. I started when it was in a test market, and it became the number 1 brand of incontinence products. I assume you all know what incontinence is. If not, you can go look it up. Okay? It's what happens after a frat party. Okay. So, launched it as number 1, got great, you think it's true, don't you? So I got great experience, great fundamental marketing experience going from that time, okay, to being number 1 brand. At which time, I had an opportunity to come down to Atlanta to work in the healthcare division. Now, in that day, you started out as a product manager. You worked with all the ad agencies in New York. It was really cool. At my going away party, they wore black armbands because I was going into the B2B world, just to show you how much things have changed. I came down to healthcare and fell in love with it. So here's the difference. When you're in consumer marketing, you have history, you can scan track anything, you can find out about what time your consumer wakes up. When I came down to healthcare, I had, I can't even remember what it was called, and they were plus or minus 20%, maybe on market share, and we gave them the information. So you really had to kind of figure out what you knew and not rely on what you could be told by everything else. Plus, you were really changing people's lives, which was pretty phenomenal. Then I got asked to go and be the head of KimFibers, and I got promoted to VP. So the good news was I got a promotion to VP. I had been in healthcare for quite a while. I ran all the businesses. I said, what's KimFibers? Okay? And basically what I was told was, it's a good time for you to go get some staff experience, and we want to see how you do in a staff role. I said, okay. So what happened to me there? I started traveling globally. That was back in 1996. And once you start traveling or live globally, your life is never the same. So first I moved from one side of the business to the other, then I started to travel globally, and then we decided to start selling our pulp mills. KimFibers actually managed, after the Scott merger, all of the pulp for Kimberly-Clark. That was like, I didn't know a northern softwood from a southern softwood, which is a different kind of tree, from a hole in the ground. So a whole new way to learn. So when you ask, why did I stay for 30 years? I moved from consumer, I moved to B2B, I moved into a staff area around managing pulp, started to sell our pulp mills, and then got called back to start doing acquisitions for healthcare, which was pretty exciting. And that's where, when I came back, healthcare was maybe 350 million, 400 million, and now we're heading for $1.5 billion this year, so it's been quite a ride. So I didn't plan any of those. I had a nice plan to be a product manager, go up the marketing ranks, and boy, that did not work. But I could not have planned something this good. So what do? Mostly, I'm a Delta employee, okay? I feel at home in a crown room, okay? And I usually look for what the label of the Kleenex in my hotel room is. That's pretty much. On the other hand, most of the time when we answer that question, we say, what do? I'm the president of healthcare. But I'm going to talk to you about culture, which is all about leadership. And I'm going to tell you what I really do is I deliver the results that our shareholders want. That's really what I'm supposed to do. Now, what is that? Last year we were $1.4 billion in sales. We're sold in over 100 countries. I have 15,000 employees. We have 10 production facilities in 4 countries, and we have offices in another 5 countries. And if you look at that, well, 12,000, it varies for us, but it's between 12 and 15,000 employees. So I'm not bored. I was in Japan last week at our sales meeting, and I'll tell you a little story about leadership. Some might say that I'm boring, okay? My kids would say that I'm boring. They're great kids, by the way. So I'm not usually a real party goer. But when I got to Japan, I was coerced, this is really going to be a scary thought, into doing Japanese karaoke. After chugging sake, okay? And I said, oh my God, this is just not what I should be doing. And then the evening was over. And mind you, when I say chugging sake, okay, it's a little different than you guys on a weekend. I might have had 2 glasses, okay? But they were toasting me, and we had to do it in one gulp, okay? When it was done, I have never had so many people come up to me and say, that was terrific. We really appreciated you being a part of what we were instead of being more to the side, okay? Lesson number 1. It's not always what I want. It's sometimes about what everybody else needs. So what's the challenge in front of us when I start talking about leadership? Because my premise up here today, and the reason I chose leadership, is I have become passionate about it. And frankly, I don't believe there were many good leaders. And I believe people manage, and they don't lead. And I'm going to tell you what I've learned going through my leadership journey. But first of all, what are the challenges? And this should make you guys excited, all right? First of all, markets are more dynamic. I mean, you can have your reputation ruined in a week based on social media. Look what's happening in the Middle East. It doesn't take long for information to get anywhere. Customers have more options, and they are less loyal, and probably a little less patient. And what I really want to talk about is talent, which is all of you. Because everybody in this room is the future of where we're going to go. And the war for talent is great and going to get greater. And you have many more options. So as you sit here as a leader and say, okay, what do I do with all of that? Those are some big challenges, despite the fact that everywhere in the world that I operate is either currently having an earthquake or a tsunami or some port is closed or whatever else is going on. So what do I believe you should focus on? I tried to put them in 3 buckets. I was going to do 10 rules, and I was going to do my learnings, and I just kind of bucketed them in 3 things. And as I go through talent, deliver now, and continuously improve, I'm going to tell you sort of my life lessons on what I've learned. Build talent. So do I have any professors in here of organizational design or organizational theory? Because I just want to know if I'm going to upset anybody. Organizations and plans really don't accomplish anything. Right? People accomplish it. Now, if you have a great organizational structure and great plans and great people, that really works well together. But it's really the people that do. And so trying to develop talent is something that I think corporations are realizing more in the last 10 years than they probably did in the decade before that. All right? Leadership happens at every level. And I want to talk about this because I get a lot of questions with a lot of people that I mentor and a lot of people that I talk to. All right? Everybody says to me, you know what, Joanne? You are the president of healthcare. Of course you can lead. I am like peon 101. I can't lead anything. I am in class. I don't even talk. And I'm going to tell you that every single day of your life, even as a student, you can choose to lead or not lead. And I'm going to tell you in a few more slides, it's all about me. You make the choice. You can do it. Look around you. You can go into any class. You can go into any meeting. You can see the people that rise to the top. You can see the people that act with confidence. You can see the people that will carry an idea. You can see the people that say they do what they say they're going to do. It might be like turning in an assignment on time. Okay? You can start to do that. So every day, you can decide, how could I start to get the experience to be a leader? And I think we overlook that. Nurture great talent. Okay? I'm going to tell you I wasn't that good at it. I've been mentoring Joy, can I say that out loud? For a long time. And frankly, I had to rearrange my schedule about 6 years ago to start to put more time into managing great talent. So I would tell you that 10, 15 years ago, talent was probably 10% of my time. I would tell you today, it's probably 30 to 40% of my time. Whether I'm mentoring people, I'm doing succession planning, I'm actually interviewing, I'm actually talking about the kind of people we need, I'm talking about how do we give people the right opportunity. And this is where my kids come in, because I know you're standing up here going, man, she's really old, okay? That's true. When you think about it, what we have to be thinking about is, what do you expect? How do we keep you motivated? And what's going to be different? And so I, believe it or not, okay, you might find this hard to believe, was on Facebook and Twitter before every other old person was on Facebook and Twitter. All right? So there's some things that staying in touch with people and having my kids really challenge me has told me that the group that's coming in, that's going to be our leaders for tomorrow, is going to operate very differently. And how do I spend enough time on that? And so, for instance, this year, one of the things I'm doing is I have coffees set up every month with employees that have been with healthcare less than 3 years, so that I can continue to be informed and better understand what the workforce of tomorrow is really going to be all about. Deliver now. You know, it's really all about over-delivering. That's it in a nutshell. In order to really get to a top position, you have to be able to over-deliver in whatever it is you're doing. All right? So here's where I want to talk about mistakes, because one of the things we hear a lot at Kimberly-Clark is, well, we're very risk-averse. And I'm here to tell you that I have made some whoppers of a mistake. And I'm still here to talk about it. It's not so much that failure is going to happen. It is. But if there's anybody in the room that's sure they'll never fail, could you just raise your hand? Yeah, I thought maybe there wouldn't be any. It is going to happen. It's not the fact that it's going to happen. It's what you do about it. How do you handle it? What do you learn from it? And I'll give you one story. This was years ago, and this was probably 20 years ago, and it still bothers me. I took over a job where there was a machine already in progress. Okay, anybody in here an engineer? Okay, anybody in here not an engineer? Okay, anybody in here familiar with Kimberly-Clark Engineering? We have phenomenal engineers, okay? I swear we could make a machine that would load itself. Just phenomenal. And when I started this job, we had decided that we could automate something that had always been made by hand. Of my 15,000 employees, I have a lot of employees who do manual conversion of products in Mexico and Thailand and everything else on a very socially responsible basis, let me add. And my gut feeling told me that with my experience, we should not continue with the machine. To say no to a machine in Kimberly-Clark is like not a good thing, okay? And so we went ahead. And we introduced this, and it was not good. Our customers didn't like it. They didn't want anything to do with it. And we had this machine. So what were the lessons? A couple lessons that happened, and when you talk about what to do about it. The first one was, you really want to bury your head in the sand when somebody starts telling you it's not the right thing, all right? Because you're looking at a succession of things you've got to deal with. But you really have to step up at that point and do something, all right? The second thing is, I didn't listen to my gut. And it's really taught me over the years that if my gut tells me that something is not the right thing to do, then I need to stop and listen. So I could go on and on. Trust me, I have failures from many, many times, okay? I have simple failures. I'll tell you one simple one. I have been the head of the executive sponsor of our women's network for over 10 years. I am on the Roswell campus. We have about 1,600 people. I used to know a lot of people's names. If I walk across the campus and am preoccupied, I can upset somebody's day. That blew me away. That really blew me away. Like, I might have something on my mind, I look too serious, people think something's wrong. That was a real learning for me, okay? Now, was it a real failure that I wasn't smiling and happy and saying hi? You could argue that either way. But it is a learning all the way along that everything you do has an impact on somebody. What got you here won't keep you here. This is the one I really want to talk about. And this is where I think managing versus leading really gets to be a key point. What gets you to a position where you're doing something like I am won't keep you there. You could be an individual contributor. You could be a top salesperson and overachieved your numbers every year. And that's really not going to keep you in that position anymore, because all of a sudden, your position isn't about you doing it. Your position is about how you're going to get the right team of people to do it. You're really there to remove barriers. You're not there to do it yourself. And a lot of people have a hard time with that because they're really good. They're really, really good engineers. They know how to design anything. I'd rather be designing that than managing people and all of the issues that come with that so they can go design it. And so that's something for you to think about as you do it, because what you get rewarded for going up the ladder isn't necessarily, and in most cases isn't, what's going to keep you there. Okay, this is where I go into the, hey, it's not about they. About 2 years ago, and I'm going to show you in a minute, 2.5, 3 years ago, we didn't have great results. And so we started down a journey of changing our culture. And I have to tell you, I have never done anything so hard in my life, because you talk about ingrained beliefs. Okay, I think I have a book about that. It's the Georgia Tech Traditions I just got. All right, I'm supposed to read on my way home. We started down this pathway, and when I first met with the consultants who were going to help us go through that, I was talking about what I thought was wrong with our results that particular year. And it went something like, we laid out the objectives, and if only they could have achieved their objectives. I went through that for a while, and they're nodding, and they're nodding, and they're nodding, and then they finally looked at me and they said, you know, it's really not about them. It's really all about you. And so from that day on, 3 years ago, what I started to say each day was, how did I let that happen? What experience am I creating for people? And what am I doing to change that cultural belief? And that is hard. That means at every meeting and everything I do, I have to think about what is the way we want to act and what am I doing to support that. So it's not about they. I think they might be instructors and professors and administrative here. Okay, it's really not about them. It's really about me. And that's a pretty tough one to swallow. The next one is my pet peeve. This is just mine. It really doesn't have anything to do with whether or not you're a good leader. I just have zero tolerance for a big ego. And I think if you watch, it's kind of interesting to see sometimes what happens to a big ego. But I don't like being the center of attention. And I think that big egos generally are not as concerned about the outcome as they are about themselves. And so personally, I just have a really hard time with that. Continuously improve and innovate. This is where I find youth so wonderful because it's about continuously learning. It's about going to a meeting, and I had a meeting today with some of my R&D people, and I said, you know what? I don't know everything that you're talking about. I manage $1.5 billion around the globe and 4,000 SKUs, and I don't. But you could help me learn that. And I think the important thing is surround myself with people who know things I don't, and don't be afraid to admit that. Okay? There's no way I could know everything, but know what you need to know and how to do that. But continuously improve, be willing to learn, change what you've done. All right? I will admit, I had to get instructions for how to turn on the TV. All right? I have a really nice TV upstairs, I can handle that. But the TV downstairs has surround sound and it goes to stereo, and then you have to do this other thing, and then you can do something else with it. And so I finally just said, I just need instructions for how to turn it on. Okay? So I'm not all the way there yet. I'm working on it. Pretty much spend the time on the one TV. I know how to turn on and off. But on the flip side, I am pretty darn good on an iPhone. All right, the other one I really think, and they kind of go together with leave a legacy. When I leave Kimberly-Clark, whenever that may be, hopefully not for a while, I want to be able to say, what did I do? What legacy did I leave? When you graduate, what legacy did you leave? And as you go about that process, I heard this once at a convention in New York, Catalyst Convention, for those of you who have ever heard of it. Andrea Young from Avon was talking, and she said something that I have never forgotten. She said, every once in a while, fire yourself. And so every year, at the end of the year, I go, okay, if I was moved out of healthcare and somebody else came in, what would they do differently? How would they look at it? What would they say, hey, Joanne, you might have missed this? And it's a tough thing to do. The other thing I do, and I admit, since my kids have been at college, I haven't done it every year, is I ask my kids for a performance review. All right, because I've been a working mom since day one. And I've gone through various stages of guilt. And then I will tell you two quick stories. One time we were going on vacation. Okay, I'm notorious. Everybody who knows me knows I'm up at like 4:30. I check email. I do everything. So we went on vacation before. And I'd get up and I'd go in a corner and I'd check email at 4:30 in the morning. So finally one year I treated my kids. We went down to Atlantis. And we were getting ready to go. And my kids said, are you bringing your computer? Okay, well, I'm not a rocket scientist, but that kind of said, okay, let's have a little conversation here. And I said, well, I was thinking about it. What do you think? And they said, no. I took a deep breath. I counted to 10. I think I can do this. I said, okay. How about my phone? They said, well, you can go and you can take your phone, but you can only answer the phone from these 3 people. And then everybody else, you can't answer the phone. And I said, okay. Now, I had to go get counseling help. But I did it, okay, because I was able to realize that that was really important. Now, on the flip side, I will tell you that for a long time, I didn't really tell my kids what I did. Mostly because I couldn't explain it. I like sit in front of a computer all day and I go to meetings, all right? When I finally started to do it, what I found out is all those years of thinking I was trying to balance and do everything was that my kids were incredibly proud of me. Incredibly proud of me and really wanted to know. In fact, my son at NYU one day as a freshman called me up and he goes, "My God, Mom, I Googled you." And I said, "Oh my God, what's on Google?" And he goes, "But like you're like important." And I was like, "Well, it all depends on your perspective, honey, but what did the Google say?" So, just think about that, okay? Fire yourself, get performance reviews from those you love, keep balance and perspective. The number one question I get is all about work-life balance and how did you do it with kids? And I always tell everybody, if you don't love what you do something else. Because I have loved this job. There are days I hate it, days I really hate it. Mostly on a Saturday when I have to leave for an international flight and I lose my whole weekend. But in reality, I have really enjoyed this job. And so if you love what you do, you'll be happier about the choices you're making. And that was what I realized, is I was happy about me, which was transferring to my kids. Those are my real nuggets when I talk about how to continuously improve, be willing to learn, be willing to get feedback, and ask for feedback. That's my leadership. It's all about me. The buck stops with me. If we don't hit our numbers, it's not because they didn't do it. It's not because they didn't understand the objective. It's all about what did I not do? What else could I have done? And that's a tough thing to do. It talks about our culture of accountability, and I want to talk about those in a minute because I've talked about the rest. Being accountable, by the way, and being leadership and working with people and nurturing them doesn't mean that you're always popular or well-liked. It means that you're willing to make a really tough decision. And that's generally why they talk about it's lonely at the top. Because at some point in time, I could be making a decision that affects you or affects you or affects you. And it's the right thing to do, but it's a hard thing to do. And that's tough. In our accountability, feedback is a gift. Feedback is a gift. And I don't know, it would be an interesting thing for Georgia Tech to do a poll of companies, senior leadership, and ask them how many of them appreciate feedback. Because most people filter feedback. And what I have learned, and it has taken us 3 years in my organization, is to really get people to open it up enough. So when I was in Japan, not the night of the sake, we were doing something, it was 11 o'clock at night, okay, so that's really 11 a.m. my time. And somebody said to me, "Joanne, do you really mean what you say about feedback?" I said, "Yes, I do." He said, "Well, it's 11 o'clock at night, can I give you feedback?" I said, "Sure." Can I go get a cup of coffee? But no, the point is having people feel that comfortable that they can give you feedback, appreciative and constructive, gives you tremendous, tremendous insight into what people are thinking. It's not always about you, but sometimes it says a lot about them. Try it with your date. Might be interesting. Might not be a gift there. You have to think about that. It's all about change management. You guys are used to change, okay? You're driving change. I saw years ago the picture. Anybody see the Time magazine cover where the I don't know, was a teenager, probably college age, was completely wired, iPad, iPhone, everything. I said, "Ben, they got your picture on Time magazine." Okay, you are comfortable with it. There are many generations. There are many cultures. Not everybody's easy with it. People think they're comfortable with change. They're comfortable with change they want to have. They're not necessarily comfortable with the change you're going to have to make. So think about that as you go forward. I've had to really, really focus and make sure I'm open to change. Tough times test leadership. I have a quote about this at the end. It's easy to be a great leader in easy times. It is really testing during a tough time. And then this I put in there is keep it simple. And I say that because, okay, I have 15,000 people. We have a big three. We have big four, but I'm going to say big three. And our objective was to be able to have everybody clear enough on what we were focused on that the entire organization would know where we were going. Because a lot of times you get complex things and you got all these strategies and everything else. You have to be able that no matter where I go in the world, if I ask somebody what are the big three things healthcare is trying to do, that they can answer that. Across continents, across languages, across cultures, and across business functions. So you're not keeping it simple because really nobody in business is smart enough to understand that. You're keeping it simple because you've got to get that message across all sorts of boundaries, more so than we ever had before. These are our cultural beliefs. This is what we're working in our organization to change our culture. Think customer, get focused, deliver now, build trust. Think about how many times do people really trust each other when they're working together. Be accountable, reach out, and most importantly, win consistently. And this is what I try to demonstrate every day as I'm doing my journey from managing to leading. So my point is, I talk to you today, you can be leading today. You can do all those things that we talked about. I do want to talk a little bit about not being afraid to challenge the status quo. I personally believe your generation isn't, and I find that refreshing. And I think the biggest thing we have to make sure of as managers is that we're not stifling that. All right? But challenge the status quo. And I had a point a couple slides back about don't follow the trends, the business trends. So everybody who's a business student, don't panic. My point there is look beneath the surface. Ask some questions. Don't just assume that because everybody's buying credit default swaps that it's the right thing to do. Okay? So don't be afraid to ask those questions. Don't be afraid to challenge it. Think for yourselves. That's going to be incredibly more important than it used to be in the past. And remember, it's not about perfection. It's about what you do about it. This quote sums it all up. It's an everyday journey for me. It's been fun. It's been challenging. I still have a lot to learn, and I know I'll still make mistakes. But all in all, I can tell you that the business we're building and the people that we have are a pretty awesome place to work. So with that, I believe we are opening it up for questions.
Let me start off with a question, and then we'll have a student question. You mentioned several years ago that you started the process of, I presume not just you, but others as well, in terms of changing the culture at Kimberly-Clark, and you indicated what your new cultural values are. What were the issues with the existing culture, and also, how do you go about changing a culture which, with that many individuals in your organization, it would be a tremendous task to do so?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing, to give you an example, is our culture tended to be a little bit passive-aggressive. So people would all nod yes in a meeting. I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. They'd all nod yes in a meeting, and then they would go out in the hallway and say, well, you know what, I really didn't agree with that. And that was a lot of where build trust came from. And so from that standpoint, we spent a day going through what are the cultural things that we do today that won't get us the results we need tomorrow. And then what are those cultural things we need to do tomorrow, which are the ones ahead on the slide. Culture changes one by one, and it starts with me. So it's taken 3 years. And I was in a meeting yesterday with my team. The candid debate and people not getting emotional or personal about it is miles from where we were 3 years ago. So it happens a little bit at a time.
Did your management go through a process of codifying what they want the culture to be? Was there some
Yes.
sessions in terms of what our culture should be?
Yes.
Some decisions on that?
So pretty in-depth.
How about training programs? Were the training programs developed and rolled out?
Oh, we have across all 15,000. We have trainees that have all been certified that are taking it across. We get regularly monitored, we get rated, and we're continually training people at different levels of it. And my team is the example. We purposely started with me and my team because we figured if we couldn't set the example, we couldn't ask anybody else to do it. And we get rated. In fact, we're having a meeting Friday. Another update on how are we doing.
Hello? Okay, works. My name is Todd. You are right now a very successful business lady, but look at the party 30 years in the past, the crepe has, which is the lowest point. You're down, really down, and how do you turn out of that? This give us an example. We can learn something.
Boy, that's a great question. What was my lowest point? I got to tell you, they haven't all been joyful. I would tell you the lowest points I had, the first one was when I left consumer, because I really believed I had my career planned out, and I left consumer for personal reasons to move to Atlanta, and that was really low. I actually interviewed all over, and I had an interesting time before I fell in love with being in the healthcare business. I would tell you very candidly that 2008 was not a good year. We didn't hit our number, and I thought we had everything working the way it should. And so it was very, very frustrating with everything that I saw people doing, why it wasn't working better. I don't know that that was really my lowest point. I'd have to ask her to go back over my career. There's probably one other year like that, but those would be the low points. How did I get out of it was the rest of your question. You know, I'm a fighter. I really am. And at the end of 2008, I said, look, I'm either going to change this or they should change me. It was one of those fire yourself questions. And so I just don't like to lose. I just don't like to lose, and I don't like to give up on anything before I've done everything I possibly can to solve it. And so I just decided I was going to figure out what it took. I'm just stubborn. Or stupid, I don't know which one.
I was wondering your difficulties as being a woman in the marketplace, especially as you went internationally, if the culture or anything changes from when you go overseas, or if people have kind of more modernized with the people you work with.
Yeah, that's actually a great question. Being a woman in this job, I'll tell you a really quick story. When the time I was in KimFibers, the Pulp and Paper Convention is in Montreal in January. At the time before we went business casual, so I was in a skirt, just keep this in mind, it'll be important. I swear it was 5,000 white males, aged 50 and me, and it was 30 below zero. And when I would walk into a meeting, they'd go, hey honey, how are you today? Okay. And that really wasn't far out of the cultural range of the US, okay? I would tell you it's different everywhere. I would tell you it's changed dramatically over 30 years. I would tell you, just being in Japan last week, that there are different cultural ways to do it, but in general, I'd almost have to say women are better recognized in Asia than in some other parts, say, of Latin America. And the way I work at it is to understand and respect the culture, but then to also make sure that, you know, I'm setting the expectation for what we need to do in respect of that culture. I would say it's changed. I would say even in corporate America, you don't even have to go outside the US, there's still some pretty subtle, I don't know if I'd call it discrimination. I honestly believe in most cases people aren't intentional. And the more we can recognize where they're coming from culturally, the more they're willing to do it. The first day I walked into Roswell, I came from Neenah, Wisconsin, a little tiny town. I was coming down to a big city. I thought, this is it, it's the Mecca. I walked into my office and they said, honey, you're new here. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting, okay? But you know what? When I realized where people were coming from, some of my best friends are some of those people. And so it's just, you know what? I take it with a grain of salt, and I try to figure out where people are coming from, and then I try to figure out what to do. On the flip side, never should anybody deal with overt discrimination or any sort of harassment, ever. Okay, and I think that needs to come forward no matter where. Oops. You have the microphone, sorry.
Yeah, looking at your path, you started off with your undergraduate degree and started in the industry, and then kind of went back and did the MBA thing. Well, I guess coming from personally, you know, about to, I guess, get into the industry with my undergrad degree. What made you come back, and you know, what were the tools that you got back from that, and then started, you know, after the MBA kind of thing?
Yeah, I had an English undergrad, and back when I graduated, there wasn't nearly the career planning that you guys have. I've watched this with my son, too. I think some of that is phenomenal. And I frankly, honestly, I knew I had to support myself, and I just didn't know what I was going to do without something else, and so I figured I was pretty intrigued by business. And so I decided the best thing to do was, and I could have been a PhD scholar, I would have gone to school the whole time, except my dad didn't pay for anything past MBA. And so I decided that that was the right thing for me to do, to balance the two and to go for an MBA, and I worked while I did it. I would tell you in hindsight, it would have been a lot easier not to work while I did it, but the reality of applying what I learned in MBA school while I was doing it was extremely gratifying, because it's a lot different to be trying to do all those things they talk about than to just be studying it and then having to apply it later. Either way is great, but that's why I went back. My sister said to me last year, I was talking about this with somebody, and I said, gosh, I really don't know why I ended up getting an MBA. She said, Joanne, the whole time we were little, you played office all the time. Like, why would that be a surprise to you? Well, thank you for that insight. Thank you for that feedback.
You have wonderful consumer products, and I really have had a lot of familiarity with the tenants. And I know that the population is getting older, and you said feedback is important. What do you see coming down the pipeline to supply this aging population that's a long way from the majority of people in this room? But the baby boomers are now 60 and older,
Right.
and they need the pens and the other things that peripheral products. And you said feedback is important. How do you?
Yeah, the question is, it's a great question. You have great consumer products. What are you doing for the category I might fall in, which is our aging population or baby boomers or whatever else you might want to call it? Actually, as part of our innovation, we've had a huge focus on innovation in the last couple years, and I sponsor one of the innovation teams. And one of the areas we're looking at is healthy aging. And so watch for that. We're pretty excited about that. We agree that healthy aging is an area that isn't really touched by anybody. Too much of that is secret, so you know.
My question, you mentioned earlier that you fell in love with the healthcare industry and that one should always love what they do. So I just wanted to know personally, what was it about healthcare that inspired you or intrigued you so much?
I will answer that with a story. We make a product called an enteral feeding tube. That is a tube that goes in your stomach when you can't digest food, and so you're getting nutrition through a tube instead of through eating pizza and hot dogs and everything else. And that's a tough thing to do. And we actually have a customer of ours who I know personally who is a 16-year-old figure skater who is deathly allergic to most food and has worn a tube forever and really can't travel because she's too allergic to things. And she actually came to our sales meeting to talk to people about the difference our product made to her life to be able to go to a dance and go water skiing. That's why I love healthcare.
You said that 30 to 40% of your time is spent working on talent building. How does it work in the other way? My question is, from whom do you receive advice, and what kind of advice are you looking for?
Well, when I say 30 to 40% on talent, it's everything from coaching with my team, mentoring other employees, succession planning, interviewing recruits. It can be any of those going along the way. Who do I try to get advice from? One of the reasons I was an executive sponsor of our women's organization was to stay close to what the challenges were for women in our organization. I'm currently doing a mentoring up with one of our younger employees. I have coffee, so I have all different. I have networks that I get feedback from, and just about everything else I can think of. So I get feedback surveys and questionnaires and all sorts of things from that standpoint. So everything I can possibly think of from the different groups that I deal with. New employees, current employees, prospective employees, people who might be employees. Does that answer your question?
The boss, from your boss, I mean the CEO of the board.
Oh, my boss is the CEO, and I see the board about 3 times a year. We get feedback from the board. Trust me, I get feedback from my boss. We have quarterly coaching sessions and an annual performance review. And he is part of this cultural change now, so we give each other feedback in between that too. Just did it yesterday.
Do you have a 360 program?
We have a 360 program, and the senior leadership has a 25-page book 360. We get significant feedback, which is very helpful.
Yes, I would like to know, you said tough times test leadership, and I would like to know what has been most challenging for you as a president during the current economic recession.
In the current economics, I'll tell you, actually, if I can answer that slightly differently, the most challenging for me is pandemics. So in the case of a pandemic, SARS, avian flu, we make most of the world's face masks and all the purple gloves in the world. You always want to wear a purple glove. Okay, we make purple gloves. When a pandemic happens, for any of you who are taking logistics, our supply and demand goes like that. And so one of the reasons 2008 was a difficult year is when you sell like this, because everybody in the world wants face masks and gloves, the next year they don't need them. And so trying to manage that and keep people motivated, and what is your objectives for 1 year versus the next, and we've had a pandemic every 3 years, that gets to be difficult. The real answer to your question right now is commodity prices, because commodity prices have a big influence on our product line. Oh, not fair, Terry.
Yeah, it's fair. You know, we put the things that we spend our time into different buckets. And so there's the work bucket, which is pretty required, the family bucket, which is fairly required. You know, there's some discretionary parts. But then there's the bucket about volunteer work, which really is discretionary. And when I think about your travel schedule and your work schedule, and then see what you do in the voluntary sector, it's kind of amazing. Why do you commit that amount of time to making the world a better place, and how does that fit in with the culture of Kimberly-Clark?
Actually, I just had a United Way breakfast this morning. Thank you, that's very kind. I would tell myself I'm not nearly as good as I need to be. The reason I do what I do is because I am incredibly lucky, and I believe I need to give back. It's part of what I should be doing. But Kimberly-Clark has instilled that for a long time. I mean, we have volunteer hours, we support United Way, we have matching gifts, we have time that we allow people to go and do things. We do on a local level where we build playgrounds and do all sorts of things. So it's been instilled throughout the company. And I'm probably very lucky because I manage the Roswell site, and one of those things is the contributions and volunteer. The woman who does that for us in Roswell works for me, and so I hear about everything we're doing. And just the number of employees we send to MedShare every month as volunteers, retirees and employees, is pretty phenomenal. So it's a culture we've had for a long time. It's, again, a part of a great company.
Hi, sort of a follow-up. So there's also the personal bucket, and I was curious, your English major, if you still spend time reading literature, and what do you read, and do you feel that that helps you buck a lot of these business trends? Because if you read, you know, Dickens or Tolstoy, that helps you in business.
Okay, well, you're assuming I have a personal bucket. Okay. I just went through an interesting course for training, and I actually started to put on my calendar sleep. You know, I would tell you I haven't read the English books I would like to read, but one of the best things about the unfortunate time of 9/11 and airplanes and everything else, and how small airplane seats have gotten, is that I now try to read books, and I have an iPad, which makes that really easy. So I would tell you what I've done is read, there's like just some phenomenal books, and I try not to work on an airplane. And I actually do try to read, and books like Rutherford's London, which I think is like 1,000 pages, I find fascinating. Most people are like, oh my God, how can you handle that? So every once in a while I try to throw something like that in, or something that I at least consider, you know, stimulating. But that's what I try to do now, is I try to read on an airplane and sleep, and then exercise. If I could do those three, it'd be a pretty good year.
So that's how you bring balance to life. Your life is exercise and reading.
You know, for years I would say I am balanced. I think balance is a tough thing. Balance is about what you can handle. And I'm pretty type A, so I would never slow down. But I would tell you, no, I haven't exercised like I should. And I would tell you that after first came my family and then work. So other things probably, at no time is anything ever 100% in balance. When my mom had cancer, I would tell you work was out of balance, and I was more focused with my mom. I just do the best I can, okay, based on what I think is balance.
Back to women in corporate America. Do you feel like you ever had to change yourself or your leadership style in order to be successful? And then what kind of advice would you give to a young woman going into the corporate world about getting through that glass ceiling?
Okay, it's a great question. Have I ever had to change? Well, okay, most of you wouldn't know this, but if anybody in the room's old enough to know that John Malloy Dress for Success, I probably gave away 50 ties, when women were supposed to wear suits with ties, way back like 15 years ago. It's so much more refreshing now. I think the real answer to that, and I've had this discussion with my boss, I think for women, particularly because there were so few, that the difference between being, how do I want to say this, aggressive, I might have used a different word. Okay, an aggressive or demanding male might be judged differently than a female. And so one of the times when I was actually at a VP and a president level, I said to my boss, what's the role model for confident, semi-aggressive female? Because it's judged very differently than a male. And I think that we've come a long way, but I think we have a long way to go. So if a male comes in and pounds on the desk, even today, I think that that's treated slightly differently than if a female came in and pounded on the desk. But I think it's changing, and I think great leaders are great leaders whether they're male or female. But I do think that there still are some differences. Have I ever changed? I would say that what I try to do more so is to know who my audience is. Okay, so if I'm talking to a number of new employees, I'm probably I'm more relaxed because I don't want them to be freaked out, okay, than if I'm talking to my deputies who know that I might be on a time schedule. So I think it's more like that. My advice to you and what I've tried to do is there are a lot more role models, and there are some phenomenal female role models out there now. Watch them, whether they're public figures nationally or close to you. Watch what they do and how they do it. Watch where they fail. And mostly I would tell you three things. One, I would tell you love what you do because it'll make a difference. The second thing I would tell you to do is to be confident in what you're doing. And then the third thing I would tell you to do is think about it ahead of time. You're at the age where you can't even imagine this, but decide now whether you think you want a marriage where two people are going to work or one person's going to work. Or what do you want to do when you have kids? Because the wrong time to think about that is when you're married or you're pregnant, okay? So think about it. You may change your mind. When I had my first child, I told myself, I will make no decision for 6 months. There is nothing that can happen in the bonding process that, in that first 6 months. And it was a very good thing because the first couple months you really just want to say, hey, goodbye world, I'm going to go be a great mom. And I was really glad that I took the time to think about it. So know yourself. Know what you want to do. Know how much stress you can handle. Know how much you want to travel. Know what it's going to take with a partner, et cetera, and think about that ahead of time. That would be my advice.
We have one
One more question?
No, we actually have two more. This one and one more to that. Go ahead.
No pressure, but it's got to be great.
Okay. There's a lot of status quos to challenge. Which ones did you actually pick and go through with Kimberly-Clark?
Wow. That was a good question. That might be the hardest question of the day. Which status quos did I challenge? I have to think about that one. Can I think about it while we ask the next question?
Sure, let's go back to that.
All right.
It's a great question.
This is our next to last question.
I'll summarize with your answer.
Yes, you mentioned you lead and manage 15,000 employees. What challenges do you face with managing so many different people and personalities?
Oh, the first one I would tell you I fail at miserably is remembering everybody's name. That's just a thing where I believe I should be able to greet everybody, and it just doesn't work anymore. That's just my own personal challenge. Primarily with 15,000, and a lot of them are hourly workers. But even with 15,000 in all of the locations, it's getting to see them and being visible, okay? Because everybody really appreciates the visibility. And secondly, it's being able to communicate through, I don't know, must be 25 languages, okay? Probably more than that. But how do we really get our message across in different cultures? And how am I constantly sensitive to every single culture I need to be sensitive to? All right, so we can't plan our sales meeting in early January in Asia because it's a Chinese New Year. Okay, I can't plan it here because something else. So, how am I more culturally aware of the world and communicating to all of them? Those would be the biggest ones.
Okay, now you answer this question. That's it.
Oh, okay, so my answer to your question is, I'm probably going to go around culture. I think I've challenged a couple things, and if you can answer that for me. The Kimberly-Clark is adopting the work we're doing on culture because of what we've been doing in healthcare. And so I think the biggest thing, if I would look back over time, is to be able to say that, yes, you can change culture, and yes, one business unit can influence that, and yes, that can have an impact on the entire corporation. That's a pretty big one. I would say that's probably the thing I'm most happy about. Okay?
Joanne, thanks for coming to Georgia Tech today.
It's great, thank you.